Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Framing the Future, a webinar series in which we embrace the topics that will basically frame the issues that will uh, be focused on in forestry in the year ahead. Uh, Today's program is a really exciting one to talk about some of the language we use to describe forestry virtually every day in every context within which many of us are familiar. My name is Gary Allen. I'm the president of the Maryland Forestry Foundation. It's our pleasure to present this series. I want to remind you that this is being recorded and will be available on the foundation's website, marylandforestryfoundation.org, within the coming week. As always, we're pleased to have with us a distinguished panel of local experts on the topic to be presented. And to do that, we've invited our moderator, who's one of our early Mel Fellows and now an urban forester in the city of Baltimore. Let me introduce and ask our moderator to step forward, Megan Carr. Megan, thank you for being with us, and Merry Christmas to you.
Oh, thanks, Gary. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone here. Yeah, very excited today for topic in urban forestry, making it near and dear to my heart. We will get started shortly, but first, a couple of quick housekeeping notes for those of you in our audience. As Gary mentioned, today's session is being recorded, which means that you'll be able to view this again, but also means that you can find our previous recordings from other entries in this series over on the Maryland Forestry Foundation website. You can also navigate over to that page to sign up to receive monthly notices of future webinars on that website. Just go to marylandforestryfoundation.org and look for the webinars tab. For today's discussion, we do welcome your engagement, so please enter any questions that you have into the Q&A box on your screen. You should be able to find that at the bottom of your Zoom window. We're going to address those questions at the end of today's session, so do feel free to enter those questions at any time, and we will give our speakers an opportunity to tell you what you need to know at the end of today's discussion. So today we're joined by Michael Pistaninzi and Colin Breidenbach. Kicking things off, Michael Pistaninzi is an urban forestry project manager for Prince George's County. Coming from a horticulture background in Boston, Michael's past work focused on native plant designs and pollinator habitat in dense urban systems. He served 3 years with the United States Peace Corps, teaching 10th grade biology and math in Liberia. And after his service, he pursued graduate studies in California, concentrating on urban sustainability and analyzing the intersection of environmental, social, and economic challenges as they relate to urban green space and urban tree canopy. Michael soon became a certified arborist and dedicated more time to urban forestry and tree planting initiatives. As a native of Carroll County, Maryland, Michael is excited to bring his skills and experience back to his home state. And in his current role, he facilitates the Right Tree, Right Place program in Prince George's County, which plants thousands of trees annually. So, Michael, I will let you take it away.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Thank you, Megan and Gary, for welcoming Colin and I to talk about the tree planting program that we call Right Tree, Right Place here in Prince George's County. I'm super excited to talk for the Maryland Forestry Foundation. I've watched a lot of these videos in the past, so I'm super excited to share what we get up to with our day-to-day. Um, so like Megan said, my name is Michael Pistaninzi. I'm an urban forestry and streetscape project manager for Prince George's County under the Office of Storm Drain Maintenance. Um, just a little bit of background for anybody chiming in from outside the state or outside the county. Prince George's County is just east of Washington, D.C. We have just under 1 million residents, right around 500 square miles. Lots of small municipalities and towns, especially up against the D.C. border there. We have that Atlantic coastal plain in the southeast, kind of leading into more of the Piedmont in the northwest. Um, I work with the Department of Public Works and Transportation, which manages over 2,000 miles of county roads. As an urban forester, most of our projects are focused mainly on the public right of way. So that's a lot of county roads to put canopy over. We have about 202,000 street trees covering those county roads, and that number is growing. And you can see there we have lots of different council districts, all with their own socioeconomics and demographics and different ways that we can uh, categorize those districts, but it's a big county, it's a lot of people, and it's a lot of roads. We have here just a little bit of analysis there from treecanopy.us, kind of just showing that we do have a lot of planting opportunities, and these opportunities are mostly in this inner beltway area. So here in Prince George's County, we have this more urban and dense ecosystem with small municipalities, access to the metro, up against the DC border. In the North County, we have more of this transportation corridor. It gets a little suburban when you have that transportation corridor from Baltimore to DC. And then the East and South County are more rural. Pictures didn't appear. We have a little bit of canopy assessment here. One of my pictures, there it is. One of my I'm just going to minimize it so we can keep that photo there. But the MNC PPC canopy assessment shows how Prince George's County has kept a pretty stable canopy through time. Now, this isn't just the street trees. This is, the whole canopy through the county. But you can see that same pattern that I've been referencing where we have a little bit more dense urban systems over to the west side of the county, and it gets pretty rural to suburban on the east and south parts of the county. This tree canopy assessment, you can see on the right-hand side, a lot more development. These purple cells are showing, tree canopy removal, while those green cells are showing tree canopy improvements. So you can kind of see that same pattern where we have a lot more development closer to the west side of the county there than to the east side. Although we do have a lot of subdivisions going in, so that's a lot of forested being removed for those subdivisions, especially on the near Bowie or near the Brandywine areas. There's a lot of development. So we do have those patterns of canopy going on in the county. And that's important to take note of because for tree planting and projects that we tackle, these projects are stretched out through time. It takes a day to remove a tree. It takes decades to put that canopy back. So when Colin and I are looking at these patterns, we're trying to make sure that we're targeting these locations that are seeing this sort of canopy decline and making sure that our program, Right Tree, Right Place, takes these into consideration so that we can get into some of these purple-celled areas, these council districts that have a lot more development and get in there with a lot more assistance and canopy development work. Of course, there it appears. So from that assessment from MNC PPC, which is really valuable, it gives a lot of context to my position. It gives me and Colin a lot of foundational knowledge for how everything's been going. We get a lot of good information here, and I just want to bring to your attention these main topics here. So the findings here that Prince George's County can improve environmental equity by prioritizing tree plantings in neighborhoods most susceptible to environmental risk. And those would be a lot of those inner beltway communities to the west side of the county. Making sure that we target those communities is important, not just for those environmental services, but that equity that we owe those communities that have maybe had a lack of investment through time. Also, the overall gain in tree canopy coverage was possible thanks to preservation and planting efforts. So this is a large part of my position, is making sure that preservation as well as planting, we have to keep our mature trees that can be kept to preserve that canopy, because like I said, it takes a long time to develop that canopy again. And recommendations from that report, preserving the existing tree canopy is most effective means for securing future tree canopy, as loss is an event, but gain is a process. And I just love that quote. Loss is an event, but gain is a process. Planting new trees in areas where tree canopy is low or in locations where tree canopy has been removed. So that referencing those maps that I showed on my last slide. Having trees with a broad age distribution and a variety of species to ensure that robust and healthy tree canopy is possible over time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. We do have a tree inventory, and I'll show some of those some graphics that we get some of that data from that helps people like Colin and I choose species, make sure that we have sizes or ages in certain communities. And then the last one there, that community education is crucial if tree canopy is to be maintained over time. Residents that are knowledgeable about the value of trees will help Prince George's County stay green for years to come. And this is such important work to educate the public, to do that outreach, to have those conversations. I mean, there's almost 1 million people living in this county. That's a lot of conversations for the small team that, me and Colin and other people at Neighborhood Design Center and the inspectors here at the county have to have those conversations to get people to value those trees, and that we, have that opportunity to tell people about how we live in reciprocity with our environment, and so that they can respect the trees. Maybe their removal request can be softened to just a pruning request, or maybe we can get more trees in a place where we wanted to. So those conversations are invaluable. So my role as a municipal arborist, I work for the Department of Public Works and Transportation. DPWT is responsible for all trees within that public right of way. So all of those street trees that are within about 10, maybe even 15 feet from the road would be in the public right of way. We plant and maintain all street trees as well as some of the stormwater facilities that are public as well. So that's over 200,000 street trees and many more hundreds in some of those stormwater facilities. And as a municipal arborist, I have to make sure to balance that equity and equality to distribute services throughout the county. I can't be planting trees solely in one of those districts that's abutting, the DC area. We have to make sure that services are distributed equally and equitably. So we need to have this balancing act of making sure that not all of our thousands of trees that we plant get shoved into one council district, that those services are spread out so all residents of the county can benefit from our programming, as well as making sure that when we do plant trees in some of these zones that we're targeting, maybe we can sneak in a few more, or put in more canopy trees, or whatever the situation may be. We have to balance that. I also have to adhere to all state tree preservation laws. I also help create operating procedures, policy, and standards of tree work. So we do all sorts of tree work, from planting the trees to pruning the trees to removal of those trees, because trees are living organisms. They do die, whether they from a fault of our own or whether they just naturally have to be taken down for safety. There's all sorts of reasons. So it's an ongoing process. It's something that kind of never ends. There's always planting, pruning, removal through time. So the program Colin and I are mostly talking about today are the Right Tree, Right Place program, and I wanted to give some context to that program. We've had risky trees in our right-of-way through the past couple decades. We had emerald ash borer, which was found in Maryland in the early 2000s. Our county right-of-way hosted tens of thousands of these ash trees at the time, and they were falling apart. They were breaking and dying because of this invasive beetle, the emerald ash borer. And so for safety reasons, for liability reasons, the county has to go and remove all those trees. And then another one that's one of our problem trees is this Bradford pear. The Bradford pear was introduced as this perfect street tree, and I've worked all around the country and I see Bradford pear in almost every city. It was marketed as a perfect street tree, and we've learned as this Bradford pear matures, it has weak branch attachments. There's a lot of breakage. It's not as sterile as it was marketed. So if you're around Prince George's County, you might see these bright white flowers in a lot of our natural areas, and that's because they've spread. So they're not as sterile as it was marketed. And right now, our county right-of-way originally had about 40 to 50,000 of these Bradford pears. We have about 8,000 remaining. That's about 600 to 800 removals per year. It could be easy to think about just taking out all of these invasive trees. However, like I showed in my last slides with the canopy maps, we don't remove all, you're trying not to clear cut a whole community's trees and just like take away their whole canopy. Colin might touch on this a little bit in his presentation as well, but we try to take a phased approach to some of these removals so that maybe a third of the Bradford pears in that community can get removed in 2015. We'll do another third in 2020 and maybe another third in 2025 so that the community doesn't just lose their whole canopy, because a lot of these communities, the way that the developers build them, maybe they just threw in a bunch of Bradford pears. In the 1980s, it was the perfect street tree, and they just filled every single family lot with this Bradford pear. We don't want to just take away that canopy from that community so quickly. So we do take a phased approach, and that's why there are still Bradford pears in our right-of-way. So that's why this program really came about. It was to reduce risk, and it was also to improve the canopy. So it came about in 2011 as this proactive program to remove and replace trees, as opposed to a reactive program. Its objectives now include not just that risk management, but we've also quantified in our industry, we've done ourselves a favor by quantifying a lot of these benefits that trees provide us, like canopy, reducing air temperatures, assessing urban heat island effects, which is a bigger problem for our inner beltway communities, mitigating stormwater runoff with all the rainfall that we get in this region. That's a big benefit from our street trees, and I have some data that shows some of that benefit. Increasing that wildlife habitat and migration corridors that we can do for our native birds and insects. Like I said before, we're primarily working with street trees. We can do some tree pruning and removal within this program, and also removing of stumps to make room for new trees. We work closely with homeowners, civic associations, HOAs, any sort of groups that want to get together and kind of get organized. Neighborhood Design Center, as our nonprofit partner, is great at facilitating this outreach and facilitating the collaboration and communication with these community groups. We work with, county council or anywhere we can get leads really to tackle removing some of these high-risk trees, these pears or really old trees that are in some of these older communities, and replacing them with appropriate trees. The program is currently administered through the Office of Storm Drain Maintenance, and one of the maybe unique factors about the Right to Right Place program is it is a design build model. So this is, we're not necessarily creating these designs on paper and sending it for approval. Arborists such as Colin, such as myself, other people with Neighborhood Design Center, Catherine Love, are on the ground looking at the street, marking for trees and making decisions about the species in the field. So we are on the ground looking to make sure that trees are appropriately spaced. We want to make sure that we're taking all of the other infrastructure in the public right-of-way into consideration, such as streetlights, fire hydrants, gas lines, parking spots, curbs, all sorts of different public assets in that right-of-way need to be considered. And as a design build model, we have the ability to have boots on the ground, marking for trees and making appropriate decisions. Maybe there's power lines, and Colin and his team might create a work order for shorter trees that don't grow above 30 feet tall. Maybe it's a skinny situation where we want to put trees, but we don't want the canopy to get too big. We can maybe get a columnar tree in that position. So this is all decisions made in the field at the moment where we're marking. We're using GIS technologies like Survey 123 or field maps to grab those positions and to communicate that to our planting contractors. There's actually a picture of Colin right here helping install a tree in front of this community member's house. I think this community member was a leader in the community. He really helped get the whole block done. So all it takes is one person to have that conversation with someone from the county like me or someone who's on our outreach team like Colin to potentially get a whole street planted, and have that community buy-in is super valuable. In addition to those canopy analyses that I showed earlier, we do have a street tree inventory, which is so valuable to our operations. I can't tell you how much we rely on this tool. We happen to use Tree Plotter at this moment, but there's lots of different tree inventory softwares out there on the market. This one was captured in 2017 to 2018. We have annual updates. We get position and size and species. Sometimes we get some health data associated with this inventory, but it is super valuable to look at our hotspots, to look at maybe like those neighborhoods I mentioned earlier that were just all planted with Bradford pear in the 1980s. We can find those communities with our inventory here. It's a large county. There's a lot of traffic in the DMV area. So something like this that allows us to do a desktop analysis and then go out into the field with a little bit of idea where we're going instead of just driving and looking at the trees. This is super valuable. It's a lot of help. It has different tools with it, and like I said, there's a lot of different inventory softwares there, but that filter tool is really awesome. For example, here I filtered for oak, so I could filter by genus, and I could find all the different oak trees we have in our inventory. Obviously, willow oak is going to be one of our main oak trees that are just older and historic, but we do our best to also include lots of different diversity with oaks. And I think Colin will talk a little bit more about choosing our specific species that we use each season. He'll get into more of like the day-to-day, the season-to-season view of this program, but Tree Plotter is really great at helping us identify these hotspots or these areas or just trends, making sure that we get that diversity in there when we want it. And it can offer us analysis power. So this is really great too. If someone needs an answer to something really fast, it's really great to have that ability to do any sort of analysis. You can see here we have most common species in our inventory. Red maple, while it's a native tree, is really great. Pushing 40% of our total inventory is a little high. So in our current Right Tree, Right Place programming, we definitely tap the brakes on red maple because we don't want to add to too much to this percentage. Now, we do plant some every year. It's a native tree. It's pretty, got great fall color, but we do try to tap the brakes on willow oak, on red maple. The high populations isn't ideal for a good, diverse urban forest. So same thing with genus here. That maple is taking up a lot of space. Quercus is great to have that as our second number two. And Colin will also talk about, like I said, how we make the choices for each season to season. We also need good tree age diversity, not just species diversity. And a tool like this helps us identify our age distribution, which is really helpful. Maybe we want to do some elevation pruning. We can target these younger trees to do that elevation pruning so that the contractor's not on a wild goose chase. We can identify those trees right away. So it's really, really helpful. And it helps us identify like those ecosystem benefits that I mentioned. We have the total tree value savings, per year, how much the trees, and I think it's more than this, but it is really impactful when I can take this to county leadership, when I can show how much carbon is being sequestered, how much our air is being helped, how much stormwater benefits we're getting. This can paint a really valuable and powerful picture for county leadership or people who aren't in our industry, who don't understand why we're such tree huggers and why we want to not just plant the trees, but preserve them too. I can bring these numbers. So it's a really great tool, and we rely on it a lot. And like I said, we rely on these diversity analyses, to look at have we planted too much of one species or a certain genus or a certain family? We always try to incorporate diversity so that if we do get a bacteria, a fungus, an insect that rolls through our county, we won't just lose all of those trees. At this point, if something came after our red maples, Colin and I'd be in big trouble. So we work, a lot of those trees aren't, maybe you've been planted before Colin and I were born, they're so old, or these communities are just older, and that's okay. But in our Right Tree, Right Place programming, we're going to target a lot of diversity to make sure that we have, we can meet these sort of standards that we've set for ourselves in our own industry. Of course, no program is perfect. There's, of course, challenges, the coordination, communication, and collaboration with all those municipalities I mentioned. I bet there's a lot of them. There's some small ones here in Prince George's County. There's some big ones, and we have to work with them to have a consistent, urban forestry plan. Species availability, I'm sure anybody who works in our industry, your supply and demand is always off. The amount of trees that you're looking for this year, well, someone had to start growing those 8 years ago, 10 years ago, so that they're available today. And if people like Colin and I start kind of changing our palette and we start requesting certain species, those have to be slow changes so that the suppliers can match that species availability and help us out. Or else, if we just change on a dime, it's very difficult for nurseries and suppliers to get us the species that we're requesting. Contractor coordination can be a challenge, although we've had great coordination with our current contractors. It's been a real success story how we've been able to go through a community, maybe remove a third of the pears, get back through that same community with the contractor, and replant within the same couple weeks. It's very seamless right now. And limited budgets for tree care. And I'm sure every municipality in America can speak to this, where there's a lot of money for tree planting, but that stretched out tree maintenance is often underfunded. We have tree removal requests, like that report said from the parks. We need to preserve our tree canopy where we can. Capital improvement projects, maybe to expand a road and build a bike lane. Well, when you expand that right away, you're going to take out trees. Resident requests, maybe they want to remove the tree that's adjacent to their property in the right of way there. Utilities, so that tree removal is a huge challenge in our programming. And then one of our big ones is community buy-in. I mean, Colin has countless stories of people who, chaining themselves to these pear trees. They have an attachment to them. Maybe that's the tree that was there since they bought the property in the 80s or 90s. And we all can't help it. You form an attachment to that tree. people don't want those pears removed, even though we know in the industry that they can be invasive and they're not appropriate anymore. We try to remove them, and we need that community buy-in. We don't want to work against the communities, so the community buy-in is essential for our operations. Prince George's County has other smaller programs to help boost the urban forest. We have median beautification programs where we try to get in native plants, some echinacea, milkweed, Amsonia, liatris in medians wherever we can, pollinator ribbons. We have the clean and green events where we have community cleanups. Again, this helps the buy-in from the community to obtain some free native trees, some native shrubs. We do tree planting workshops. It's a lot of fun. It's twice a year, and it's a way to just get the community together to get involved with these greening events, these cleanup events that can help install some trees in front of a sign, just to add some pride to your community, some civic association involvement, some school involvement. It's a lot of fun. We partner with the Prince George's County Beautification Committee to host an Arbor Day event. It's a lot of fun to get kids involved, to recognize the residents of the county for pollinator habitat that they've created, a rain garden that they've created. So it's a lot of fun to partner with the beautification committee there, as well as funding partners. The Chesapeake Bay Trust has given us a large grant to plant native trees in these underserved areas defined by the 2021 Tree Solutions Now Act, which covers a lot of Prince George's County. So a lot of benefits come to the residents of the county because they directly qualify for these free native trees. And we're happy to help. It's been a lot of fun to target native trees, to get to nerd out with Colin and the NDC crew about what native trees we can source and which ones are our favorites and stuff like that. And it totally takes a village. I need to send shout outs to the DBWT public servants that make a program like this possible. Joanna Smith is the Associate Director of the Office of Storm Drain Maintenance, constantly advocating and supporting this program. It's been so much fun to step into this program and work with her and her leadership team. She's actually back here at the Arbor Day event. We also have here the Assistant Director of the department, Stacy Smalls, is in these pictures. So to have that support from your leadership team means a lot for tree planting. And then a special shout out to Wayne Lucas. He's a landscape architect and arborist who spearheaded the Right Tree, Right Place program in 2011. I don't know if anybody here has created a new program or a new tree planting program. There's some growing pains. I've tried it before. It's very difficult. And the whole reason why this program runs so smoothly is because of him and his advocacy and efforts. That tree inventory that I showed you guys is because of him advocating and getting that tree inventory together. So all of this would not be possible without our partners and our contractors. It's been a great success story. And with that, I'm going to step away and let Colin take you into the more day-to-day view of the program.
All right. Thank you, Michael, for a fantastic overview of a complex system. But I think that's a really great snapshot. And if I need to describe to someone what a lot of the day-to-day is for our urban forestry team, I might just point them to your presentation because it's a great overview. And yes, like partnerships are really key in urban forestry. And so very pleased to have that representation shown with including Colin Breidenbach in the discussion. Colin is an urban forestry project manager and certified arborist for the Neighborhood Design Center in Prince George's County. Colin has a background in conservation and environmental science, working with the Maryland State Parks out in Western Maryland his first year out of college. Now, in year 4, working at the Neighborhood Design Center, Colin helps facilitate the Right Tree, Right Place program, which works to maintain and expand the tree canopy in Prince George's County. Community engagement and collaboration are central to the program's mission in bringing equitable tree planting and maintenance initiatives to communities across Prince George's County. As a native of Annapolis, Maryland, Colin enjoys making an impact on tree canopy in his home state and in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So thank you for being here, Colin.
Great. Thanks so much for the introduction, Megan. And thank you, Michael, for such a good kind of view of things in Prince George's County. Michael did a really good kind of macro view. So I'm going to get in a little bit more to the day-to-day and some of the operations of the program and NDC, their niche kind of in the program. So I'm going to share my screen here and kick it off. Great. So the Right Tree, Right Place program, you guys just heard a lot about it, but like I said, I'll get into some of the specifics here. So first, I'll talk about the nonprofit partnership that the Neighborhood Design Center has with Prince George's County. Um, the Neighborhood Design Center, or NDC for short, is a design nonprofit founded in 1968. It was founded in Baltimore initially and founded to address some of the inequity of resources in the design world, especially in lower income neighborhoods. Um, since the nonprofit got off the ground and made some progress, we opened up a second office in Prince George's County, and we are currently located in Mount Rainier, Maryland, just outside the DC border. So we've had a long-standing relationship with Prince George's County, and specifically with the Department of Public Works, where Wayne and Michael are. So it is a dynamic partnership that kind of enables the program to facilitate through kind of a community engagement, community buy-in, and outreach arm. We take an intentional and personal approach to each community. We kind of tailor our approach to the community as best seen fit. And some other collaborators are county council members, community organizations, private contractors. Those are all also acting partners. So Michael kind of gave an overview of this, but I'm just going to shout out some of the kind of nuts and bolts of the program operations. So we operate in the county right of way. We manage risk of roadside trees. We enhance and increase tree canopy. We engage, educate, and collaborate with communities, and monitor, maintain roadside trees. So this is just a little view of the program calendar, of kind of how we work and kind of organize our work throughout the year. And it is sort of a rolling calendar. There's very few hard deadlines or anything. We're kind of doing a lot of this work throughout the year, but this kind of just helps us organize it. So the initial phase of I guess the start of any new fiscal year is the scoping phase, where that is determining our community list and project sites that we like to work in. We do that initial outreach to those areas, to the communities, identify community leaders, and just kind of gauge interest in the program. That kind of moves us into the engagement phase. So that looks like just scheduling community meetings and site visits with residents once we've kind of identified those interested parties and those community leaders. Getting out for a site visit with a community member is always super helpful because we can, kind of see some of the potential tree issues they're talking about, or just kind of see firsthand what the scale of the project might look like for a specific area. The next phase is the design phase, which is kind of the fun part. So that looks like doing our field work, being out on foot, doing the risk assessments for trees, capturing maintenance needs, and marking and specking for new plantings. And then that leads us into creating designs. So we create designs through ArcGIS. We create, that's where we're doing our species selection. And then that moves us into the implementation phase. So that looks like the removals, the prunings, the stumps, stake removals, whatever it might be, getting addressed by our contractor. Then creating those designs, work orders, we send those to our planting contractors. And the planting side, that begins in the winter, usually like sometime late November, December. We're about 2 weeks in now, so we just kicked off recently for the FY26 planting campaign. That usually runs about until like March, maybe like early April, kind of depending on weather events. And then lastly is the monitor phase. This is where we'll, in the fall, following a planting season, we'll do our survivorship checks. We'll send out our stake and hardware removal, so they get removed about a year, post-transplant. And, the earliest thing that happens in the planting phase is the replacements of trees that died within that first year. So a little bit more on the scoping side of things. Scoping process, this consists of IDing those communities we're interested in working with. We do this through a number of different ways. One thing is canopy analysis, where our tree inventory comes in handy. Sometimes we honestly don't always need that, since a lot of us are so familiar with the county, we're out in the field, a good amount. We can see firsthand those communities that have, a low level of canopy. So canopy analysis is one of the main drivers of our scoping list. Maintenance needs, past sites, we love returning to past communities that we worked in and we already have a relationship in. Those are always easy to work with. Community members there kind of know the program. So, a lot of that work may be more maintenance focused since some of the initial stuff has been done. And then also just interest in the program. We have a public facing website. So sometimes people will just hear about our program and shoot us an email. And, we try and make it a low barrier of entry. If they're interested, then we're certainly interested in partnering up as well. Not all of our work, but a lot of our work does focus on low to moderate income areas. So and after that, we make our initial contact. Like I said, we'll ID the community leaders or very, interested residents. And identify if they have a civic organization or an HOA, green team, anything like that. Any kind of core group that we can work with to better facilitate the program to other members of the community. Then lastly, we'll set up our community meetings and site visits. Usually a site visit comes first, and then a community meeting will kind of open it up to the rest of the community. If they do, monthly or kind of bi-monthly meetings over Zoom or in like a town hall or something, it's just a good chance for us to come, present our program, answer any questions. So I'll talk up a little bit more about the community meetings in a moment here. So the outreach and engagement, one of NDC's core missions, it emphasizes community-led design, collaboration with the community members. We try and make that central to our approach. Like I said, we'll hold community meetings and site visits and just generally try and be as open as we can to community members. We ensure that we're publicly reachable. We have a public-facing email and phone line. Like I said earlier, we'll focus a significant amount of our resources in low to moderate income areas. That's just because these areas, historically have seen lower levels of public investment. So certainly that, tree canopy is one thing that there's less of there. Engagement is especially crucial here because these communities historically kind of been left out of the public design discourse. So they might be a little bit apprehensive to change. And new resources coming in that may not be maintained. So trust building is a super important portion of that. And we keep organized records of community info, and try and keep community context. So that when we jump back into a community, maybe a few years later, we have kind of that baseline. So like I was talking about with our community meetings, this is one thing in a series of engagement methods. So we'll try and schedule a time where our program can jump on and just kind of present the program, iron out any questions, kind of fit it to, what the community can expect. We'll discuss program operations, the timeline, and then, get into some of the design stuff, specific tree needs or concerns that they might be having. We'll talk about specific tree species they may be interested in seeing, and just kind of generally do a good overview of the program. We'll also sometimes talk about some educational, things, why trees are important, obviously, what they can do for the community, benefits, and then talk about some basic tree maintenance and maintenance education. So things like, elevation pruning, mulching correctly, the proper amount of watering, all things that can go a long way into tree survivorship. So right here, I've included a map of Prince George's County and the urban heat island. So you can see highlighted here is the inner beltway area that Michael was speaking a little bit about, is obviously suffering a lot more, from the heat island effect with lower canopy levels. These areas are older, they're more densely developed, being like pushed up against the district like that, and also experience redlining with the building of 495 Beltway. So obviously higher levels of impermeable surfaces and lower canopy. These areas also have more of a history of neglect regarding public assets. So like I was saying earlier, that trust building is a significant part of the engagement. Communities want to know that we're not just going to dump trees there and then, leave, never come back. Like they need to know that kind of those will be maintained, we'll be back in to check up on things and monitor. So that's always super important. Just real quick on our field work, much of our work is field-based. I'd say close to about half our week on average is spent in the field, all throughout the year. That's doing tree risk assessments, marking and specking for new tree planting locations, doing site visits with residents and our colleagues sometimes, sometimes Michael and I and the rest of the team will get out there in the field if we're dealing with kind of a different situation or a tricky site. And all of our mobile data collection is through ArcGIS app Survey 123. So we have a survey set up with a number of different fields that are helpful for capturing the kind of specific type of data that we're looking for. Just a little bit on the tree risk assessment. Michael touched a lot on this, but we're obviously, first and foremost, we're reducing risk, so we're identifying and assessing high risk trees throughout the county. We have a Bradford pear here. It has that white mark, so that's our indicator for a tree that is scheduled to be removed. So that's for our contractors to easily spot the trees. On the site, we'll determine best solution, collect data point. We'll mark a replacement planting for any tree that's getting removed, and then those get sent to our program contractors. We obviously canopy preservation is a big goal of ours. So if we can get away with doing a pruning, like a structural pruning or a dead limbing, we'll certainly like to opt for that. But with certain trees and certain conditions, it's just not possible. And we do often utilize our tree inventory to filter for trees with different risk ratings, moderate to high risk ratings. So you can see on the right side picture is a specific tree in our inventory that was inventoried to be in, kind of mediocre shape. The maintenance work that was recommended at the time of the most recent, assessment was to prune the deadwood from the silver maple here. So that'll kind of help filter, some new areas that we may not necessarily work in if it's not a community that we're designated to work in, but it's still, a roadside tree that needs work. This will kind of help us jump around the county and find some of these trees that need some attention. So now into the design phase. Michael also included this graphic of the most common species in the county. So obviously red maple is an overwhelming majority of our canopy here. So he kind of spoke to why we are looking to improve that, diversity of tree species. We follow Frank Santamore's 30-20-10 rule as kind of a guideline for in principle for species selection, which is aiming to not exceed 30% of any one family, 20% of any one genus, and 10% of any one species. So we'll take this approach to a specific community we can filter all the trees within a certain community. And obviously, this pie chart will look a lot different based on, the community that we're filtering for. So when we're designing a specific community, we're kind of trying to take this approach best we can. We're also prioritizing Maryland native trees. We do plant non-natives, but we like the majority of our trees to be Maryland natives. And here is just a look at our top 10 list of tree species planted and genuses planted in our FY25 year, so this past year. So leading off is American elm, next with river birch, American linden, bald cypress, honey locust, American hornbeam, sweet bay magnolia, okame cherry, Allegheny serviceberry, and southern red oak. As you can see, we're really trying to put an emphasis on large canopy native species with our top 5 right there. And then there's some of these other smaller natives that are great for areas that are a little bit tighter, might have utility lines. Okame cherries are certainly notable in the DC area with their early blooming flowers, so people like to see those. And then our genus list looks relatively the same, just with Quercus is actually number 2, so that's just because there's so many different oak species that we plant. So that comes in at number 2. Obviously, we love planting oaks. They're really the powerhouse tree. They do so much as far as they're long-lived. At the maturity, they cast, I'd say the best shade and just support so much different biodiversity. So anywhere that's appropriate, we're trying to get oaks in as much as we can. Just a few of design principles that help guide our decision making. Choosing the right tree for the right location. So we're taking into account wires and utility lines, underground utilities, the width of the strip, shade. So shadier spots, we like to get some more understory type species in that'll thrive there, and as well as just community input. Seeing what the community wants, and if they have any kind of specific needs or wishes for trees they'd like to see. We're also, like I spoke about, aiming to promote tree diversity. And in addition to that, wildlife biodiversity, reducing heat, and depending on the area, but really, anywhere this is important in the Chesapeake Bay region, is addressing stormwater runoff. Our planting implementation. So like I said, the season generally occurs from about December through March. We plant in the winter when those trees are dormant. Replacements are done. That's kind of the first thing that gets done in the planting season, those replacements from the year before. We also take care of single tree requests. We call this kind of our odds and ends list. So this is sort of a rolling list of more individual based tree requests that, sometimes a resident that's familiar with the program will reach out and say, hey, I have a dead tree in front of my house. Could you guys take care of that? So we try and get to as many of those as we can. And then stake removals, those get taken off after a year. When the trees go in, they're 2 inches in caliper. They come staked when planted. And depending on the site, we'll sometimes include deer guards, if it's, proximity to a kind of a woodier area or, more suburban area. So just finishing up, that was all the Right Tree, Right Place program. I just wanted to highlight a little bit of neighborhood design center specific forestry work. So first off is the National Fish and Wildlife Grant. We've received this. This is our 3rd year, I think, that we've received this grant. So what essentially this does is allows us to create inventories for Prince George's County incorporated municipalities that are in the county but not technically part of the county. They don't, we normally wouldn't facilitate this program in these areas. So just a list of all the ones that we've worked on to date. District Heights, Cottage City, Colmar Manor, Seat Pleasant, Bladensburg, Forest Heights, and then in 2026, we'll be working in Capitol Heights and Brentwood. So what this consists of is data collection for street trees done on foot using our ArcGIS Field Maps app. At each tree, we'll capture any existing tree in their, in their public right of way in these towns. We'll capture the species, location info as it relates to the addresses, condition that the tree is in, and any recommended maintenance that we would do on site. We also capture open tree locations where new trees can be planted. We do a canopy analysis. So we look at, kind of similar to what we use our inventory for. We look at, the species numbers for each species and genus, and we'll kind of recommend, based on that, we'll recommend new trees and what species may want to be focused on if these municipalities are able to get funding to do some new tree planting. At the end, we'll also do a maintenance training and education session with the town. Usually, it's like the Department of Public Works staff in town, but sometimes there'll also be a green team in these towns, some passionate individuals. So we'll like to include them on these presentations as well. So yeah, this is a great way for our organization to engage and kind of make a forestry impact in towns that we, normally wouldn't get to work with through the Right Tree program. So, I think these inventories can go a long way for just managing their canopy better, prioritizing new tree plantings, where those would go, what species those would be, and just kind of staying on top of maintenance, which is so important. And lastly, just to wrap up, a new project that we're working on this year. This is the East Pines Community Forest Patch Restoration. So the East Pines community is in Riverdale, Maryland. It is actually a county. It is part of the county. It's not its own municipality, but it has this patch of forest kind of like within the community that's community owned. It's a 1 acre forest patch. It was formerly functioning kind of as a community space. Like there's some playground equipment in there that we found when we went in the first time. Has kind of since been abandoned for a number of years. It's overgrown with invasives, most notably bamboo, English ivy, and wisteria, as well as a number of others, a lot of the other usual suspects. So we completed an inventory using a plot, grid sampling method where we tallied all the native tree species, the number of invasives, the percentage of coverage of those invasives, since a lot of them were vines. And then we tallied up the number of dead trees that would kind of need to be removed. We held some tabling events near the site to discuss project work with the residents, kind of received feedback on what residents would like to see, maybe some context on how they would used to use the site, if they're familiar with it. Then we, about a month later, we held an invasive species ID and maintenance workshop with residents. The invasive removal portion, actually a couple weeks ago, we got goats to come in to do what they do for about a week, eat away at those invasives. So I think that made a big difference. And then very soon in winter of 2026, we'll be getting bamboo removal contractors to come in and remove a good portion of the bamboo. We plan on replanting some of the areas within this plot in the spring, and then there will be a monitoring phase on the site for the next like 2 to 3 years, as well as working with the community members to help manage the invasives and kind of gauge their capacity for spotting those invasives and letting us know when things might be creeping in and it's time to get back out there. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in, for listening. This is my contact info right here. If you're interested in reaching out, if you're a county resident or anything, I would love to reach out. And we also have a neighborhood design center has a couple social media pages that are pretty active, on Instagram. So that kind of a good way to kind of highlight some of the additional work that the neighborhood design center does in Prince George's County and in Baltimore. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Colin. That was another great presentation. So again, thanks to you both for excellent discussions today. I saw that a couple folks in the audience have raised their hands. For those folks, if you would please enter your questions into the Q&A box That should pop up at the bottom of your screen. Um, we will be able to field your questions that way. While we wait for folks to enter their questions, I'm quite curious about a lot of the program. Having opportunities to replace things like Bradford Pear would be really appealing. So I have lots of questions there, but I guess starting from kind of, I guess, the wrong tree angle, in general, about how long does it take between, identifying a tree for removal to getting it felled, getting the stump ground out, and getting an actual replacement in the ground?
I would say it all depends on the time of year. It can be anything from, a week. Our removal contractors have the ability to work really quickly, and so do our planting contractors. So a lot of these removals and specking for removals takes place in the spring and summer when tree issues are a little easier to identify. Not to say you can't do it in the winter, but obviously when all the leaves are on, it's a little easier to identify those dead branches. So we'll do a lot of them, a lot of our risk assessments then. So there's not usually too much overlap. There's plenty of time to get those out of there, to get the stumps ground. But we are still, certainly doing this, that same level of work through the winter, um, where sites will need to be, trees will be need to be felled, stumps ground, prior to our trees coming in. So, it can, yeah, they are, I would say our contractors really have the ability to move really quickly, if they need to. So, we're grateful for that.
Great. And thinking about the right trees then, and kind of pivoting to that topic, we have a few questions in the chat about that, but I kind of wanted to start from sort of a broad perspective. How often do you all review your planting palette, and what's that process like? What are your considerations if you're thinking about removing something from the list or potentially adding a new species?
I would say we're not working off of a list that maybe this comes with a communication with our contractor. So we will visit the nursery every year, look at what stock is available for that season, and sometimes it's shifted or it's changed a little bit. So we definitely have to keep up that communication with our contractor who procures those trees. So maybe there's an issue with a certain species one year, so we have to tap the brakes on that one. We had a difficult time with red buds last year because of vascular wilt disease and sourcing those ones. So we needed another small canopy tree to put underneath power lines. So sometimes it isn't like this set formal list, but it comes with that conversation in mid-fall, maybe late fall, where our contractor will have to tell us what's available for that season.
Great. And Susanna had a couple of questions on specific recommendations. So she asks, what species are your favorites for parking lot island hell strips and little narrow squares beside sidewalks? And related to that, any trees that should not be planted near sidewalks because of, root issues, especially with sidewalk lifting.
Do you want to tag team this, Michael?
Yeah, you go first.
I feel like we both have, some good stuff to say on this. Well, I can start off by saying, one thing we notice a lot of, this is partially because of how many are there, but is the red maples in the county. There, since it's a shallower kind of rooted species, they lift up the sidewalk quite frequently. Really, not even to maturity, like, even after, 10 years or so, you'll start to see that sidewalk lift. Um, so if you're doing a red maple, you want to make sure that the width is it's wide enough to get one in there, and but that's really that goes for almost any tree, any large canopy tree. You want to make sure there's sufficient width in the strip there. So anywhere that has that, we what we would consider wide, we like to get those large canopy species in, especially oaks. Some for the narrower ones, some I like to do honey locust as a large tree that they tolerate dry soil pretty well. So that I guess I would say that for some of these like parking lot islands that we don't normally plant a lot of, but areas that are akin to that, I guess. Some of these kind of more tightly kept trees with deeper roots.
Yeah, I'd echo what Colin said. We always have to, some of those trees that live in riparian habitats naturally, well, they didn't evolve to have deep roots because they're in a riparian habitat. They just get all their water right from that surface there. And I think a common misconception with the public and trees is that trees, are shaped like carrots, like they're just sending all of this root system 10, 20 feet into the ground, when in biology, most roots are within about the first 6 inches of the tree, anyways. And you can see this when a tree falls over, the whole like root plate that gets lifted up, most of those trees are at the surface anyway. So we do have conflicts with too many people trying to use the surface, whether that's sidewalks or whether that's utilities or whether that's us with our trees, everybody's in the same space. So some of these conflicts will just come up in urban forestry, and we just try to mitigate them. Um, I've seen instances where a tree is planted in the park strip and then the adjacent property is running an irrigation system. So those roots are just searching for that, lawn water that's available there, and it just lifts the sidewalk. So there's too many environmental factors to point to one reason why sidewalk lifting might happen, or whether it won't happen, or it could be species specific, but it could be soil specific. There's just too many factors in the field. And when we're looking for certain species, we're trying to look for something that mostly will fit in the space. Our goal is canopy. So the largest trees, we have a 3 foot park strip. No, I'm not going to put an overcup oak in a 3 foot park strip, but maybe that red bud could fit there. Maybe that white fringe tree could fit there. And if we're not in one of those native zones and the community really is pushing for something like flowers, maybe it is a cherry, maybe it is a crepe myrtle that'll fit in that 3 foot park strip. Any tree is better than no tree, whether it's exotic or native. And we're just going to try to appease the community. Maybe they're really pushing for those flowers that they want that show in early spring. And if they're going to be happy with that cherry tree, we're happy to provide that for them. If they feel that pride for that tree, we just want that relationship to be there. And we can put that overcup oak in another spot. We'll find another position for it. Like I showed in my presentation, there's 500 square miles here. We'll find another position for it.
Great. And so speaking of, talking to communities and figuring out what kinds of trees they want to see there, Brian had a question about what methods you use to engage communities in planting projects. How do you start making those connections, especially if you're going into a new location where you might not have a pre-existing relationship?
Yeah, great question. So we use all sorts of resources to help, kind of get that community info. A lot of times county council members will be helpful in that if they, if they have a tight relationship with the communities within their council district. So they can help kind of identify the framework and community leaders for a community. And then once we make that initial contact, it's about, building trust with them, and getting scheduled to really speak to the community at large about the program. But yeah, I would say, if we don't have any historical records of that community and getting to those new ones, that is the hardest part. So yeah, county council and I would say also other county programs may have worked there. So sometimes like we're in the Office of Storm Drain Maintenance, DPW, this program is housed under. Sometimes they've worked in a particular community on capital improvement projects. Sometimes the Neighborhood Design Center and my colleagues over there have worked in a community that we haven't worked in through Right Tree, Right Place. So we really try and use all the resources we have, available to us to get community info if there's a community that has especially, large tree needs or, low canopy.
Yeah, and those other programs that Colin mentioned, where he's in those other places, or the Green and Clean program that I mentioned, or the Arbor Day event, those are great places to chat with the community, see if we've missed a neighborhood or a cul-de-sac or something. Those little events, those little conversations can ripple through time, and you might get some fruit from those conversations maybe 12 months later or something. Maybe you were over at that church helping them plant something for Clean and Green, and it was just some daffodil bulbs, but that leads to more conversations with people who go to that church, and you might meet someone there. So you never know where those conversations will ripple out to.
Great. I think we have a couple time for a couple more questions before we pass it back to Gary. So Julie asks, are there any trees that were once thought to be good street trees but are now failing due to new pests or climate issues?
I would mention one, Colin actually had it on one of his slides, the silver maple. We've noticed that it classically is a Maryland native tree, but as climate change shifts those climates northward, silver maple, we're seeing a lot of breakage. We're seeing it not do so well. It doesn't like the summer heat that we've been having. You know, it wants to be up in New England, and its range is sort of floating that way. And this is a big problem for all of us in the tree industry, where we're planting a tree that could live 80 years. Well, what's the climate going to be like in 80 years? So Colin and I frequently have conversations about planting, more southern red oak or southern magnolia, southern trees from, North Carolina, South Carolina, in anticipation of those climate zones shifting northwards. So yeah, that silver maple that was on one of Colin's slides came right to my mind.
And of course, this conversation started around things like ash trees, and although they're not a common street tree, beech trees in our park spaces, we are likely to be losing in the next few years, unfortunately. So there's always something new and exciting coming for us, and we all just have to do our best to adapt.
Right.
Yep.
All right. And finally, we have a pretty technical question. So someone here getting into the nitty-gritty. What stock and size requirements do you have for your planting vendor? If so, do you know how many are container versus B&B trees? And is that a contract grow relationship?
I can tackle that one. Colin mentioned this a little bit, where we do have specifications for street trees. So you can't put like a little sapling in the park strip. I didn't touch on it too much in our slides, although it was a bullet point. There's vandalism, there's accidents that happen for our street trees. You'll see a tire mark through a median, and you're like, "Huh, what happened here?" So anybody in urban forestry has those situations. So we do have a height requirement. I think it's about 8 feet tall minimum or a 2-inch caliper minimum. Now we will accept something that's 1.75 inches. Like I said, the supply demand relationship with our industry is it's never going to match up. Just because of the way trees grow, they're dynamic organisms that we're getting in a specific season. So we try to get to 2-inch caliper, whether it could be 1.75, that's fine. But we do need that height. The double stake system is through specifications through the Department of Public Works and Transportation, mostly mimics the State Highway Administration's policies with street tree planting as well. So we do have those specifications. Most of ours that we're using now are ball and burlap. I have worked in municipalities where we've used containerized trees. Maybe a 15-gallon would be as small as we'd go, but we do want a bigger tree. We don't want to be waiting around 10 years to go from a 1-inch caliper tree to a 2.5 inch. So we do try to source more of a larger size.
All right. Well, it's 2:08 now, so I know that we are keeping folks a little bit late. With that in mind, Gary, if you have final comments that you'd like to make.
Well, first, I'd like to thank the gentlemen for the presentations. They were excellent and very informative. Then I'd like to spend just a second abusing my position and ask you one question that we keep getting at the Maryland Forestry Foundation in light of the number of emerging threats to tree canopy these days. And the one that turns out to be most visible to many people in the public is the spotted lanternfly, which seems to be visible everywhere these days and particularly overwhelming in many neighborhoods this past year. So I'm wondering, just in light of these emerging threats and that example, how has that affected your program's implementation on street trees? The growing number of insects and diseases that seem to be cropping up, almost a new one every single year in the public mind.
Yeah, I can touch on a little bit of that, and Michael can chime in, but like I'll just echo what Michael said, is just being flexible and adaptable to our planting palette. Really not really trying to diversify our tree canopy. So if there are trees that are especially affected, obviously it seems like lanternflies. They have a whole host of trees that are affected there. But yeah, with climate change and potential emerging threats through that, and invasive pests, yeah, just really trying to make a diverse and resilient canopy. I can't speak quite too much yet to the spotted lanternfly, since this was like, I think, what I noticed really the first like big year that it was, they came to our region. Obviously they came, from further north and have been moving down, but pretty quickly. So that is certainly an emerging pest and threat that we're keeping kind of top of mind right now.
I agree. I think the name of the game is just resiliency here. I mean, I don't see the county as taking a we wouldn't spray for the spotted lanternfly. We wouldn't treat our trees for something like that. Um, there's not enough research right now to support that sort of management technique. So at this time, it's what Colin said, resiliency and diversity to hope that our ecosystem can kind of reject that introduced pest, that our native birds can sort of learn to attack that insect. I haven't noticed too much like branch dieback. I know that I think they're a sap sucking organism that just sort of pull those resources from our trees. But if we keep our urban forestry trees healthy, they should be able to get to survive that sort of attack. If I'm not seeing that huge branch dieback, if I'm not seeing those losses, we're just going to try to endure and try to see if our diversity and resiliency can pull us through the spotted lanternfly.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Colin, for excellent presentations. And I want to thank all of those who have tuned in to today's program for joining us today. I want to remind you that our program is offered each month on the third Thursday at 1 o'clock, Framing the Future. And we're going to be looking ahead in 26 at a variety of new programs which we think will attract your attention. Let me call your specific attention to the one we're working on for January from the Alliance for Justice in Colorado about advocacy efforts. So many people are concerned about the chaotic government support for urban and community forestry at the national level and in its impact on state level support in light of the budget shortfall that faces the upcoming legislature. So we'll be looking at how you can be a more effective advocate and what are the legal limits on your work as an advocate in the year ahead. We'll also be talking about the Forest Conservation Act's implementation and the new handbook that's due out this year, and specific pieces of legislation that'll be proposed in the new legislative session, which we'll probably highlight in February. Again, I want to thank all of you for joining us and remind you that the Foundation has a urban forestry careers program for high school students on the University of Maryland campus, and registrations and applications are now open on our website for that program. So if you're interested in attending in July of 2026, now's the time to begin to plan ahead for that program. It's unique to the nation, and it's a very special program for participation. We look forward to the attendance of many of you, and certainly from this local area. Again, Michael and Colin, thank you, and Megan, thank you for your moderation. I wish all of you a happy holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year. Take care, friends. Bye-bye.